Ross, really important figures today. This is for January, of course. I'm hitting refresh. They're about to drop any minute. Talk us through it as we
They've actually just dropped as we're talking right here now, Tom. In fact, the unemployment rate for January has dropped from 6.6% in December to 6.4%. I'll bring up a little bit more detail from the Australian Bureau of Statistics very shortly, but that's good news. It's actually better than the consensus forecast of most economists. It also indicates that a number of other things have occurred, that the number of people in employment, as I'm starting to get these details through, has risen to 12.93 million people. Now, to give some perspective to that, during the peak of coronavirus, so go back to May last year, the number of people employed at that stage was 12.1 million people, so some 800,000 down on where it is today. It also means that Australia is getting very back close to where employment was before coronavirus really took hold. In December 2019, there were 13 million Australians who were effectively employed at that time. So just repeating that the unemployment rate in Australia has eased from 6.6 to 6.4%.
And gee, imagine getting it down to in the fives. It'd be fantastic to happen soon. Just interesting looking at it. So full-time employment increased by 59,000. That's what we like to see. Part-time decreased by 29,000. But monthly hours overall decreased by 86 million. So normally we just look at that sort of headline, full-time good, part-time bad, for want of a better dumbing down. But the hours have dropped there.
Yeah, so what this is perhaps suggesting is, number one is, remember, Christmas and Christmas shopping. So there are more hours generally worked in December than what there are in January. The second part about this is the ongoing issues of the economy, and in particular, I would suggest, in northern Queensland and the tourism industry there, there's clearly fewer casual jobs around the place. And so this is again leading to less hours worked. But the bright spot is very much the full-time employment, that more people are getting off JobKeeper. We know more people are getting back into the workforce. The big test is quite clearly going to be the end of JobKeeper at the end of March. What happens to employment at that stage? And secondarily, my understanding is behind the scenes, there's a number of companies that are really very much teetering on the edge. JobKeeper has been keeping them alive. And even if you say, for example, saw Crown today, I think Crown had something like $130 million in JobKeeper payments it received over the course of the past 12 months. If you go and have a look at say, for example, Star, again, a casino operator, there it was, I think, net payments of more than $50 million. So you can see the amount of money that's gone into, fairly big employers in that whole leisure and hospitality area. Once that starts to come off, then question marks about the levels of employment in some of those businesses is quite clearly going to be up in the air. Yeah,
well, we've got JobKeeper ending and the beginning of effects of people having to start paying back loans, including business loans. Insolvency laws were honeymooned until the December 31 period. So again, this has just started to trickle through. This goes to the uncertainty, right? That yes, everything we're seeing, it's quite encouraging, but it is a mystery. I know we've had Treasury and the RBA talk about how much the end of JobKeeper will affect things, but that's the unknown. To what extent we'll see jobs go and how much that uptick in unemployment happens.
And that's right. And that's the reason why the Reserve Bank, even the government itself, has been slightly cautious on its outlook statements, even though quite clearly you've got interest rates pretty much at zero. You've got still significant stimulus going into the economy, and you sense that even the government, when it releases its budget, will be targeting stimulus towards some of those areas that have been affected, which is going to be leisure and hospitality. It will be northern Queensland, the tourism areas there. But the one issue also is to bear in mind that, say, New Zealand had seen its unemployment rate fall into the fours. And so really here in Australia, if you start to see significant falls in the unemployment rate, it's going to put some pressure on the Reserve Bank as time goes on. Now, the Reserve Bank has said it's going to hold interest rates low for some 3 years. It's not being forced by inflationary pressures. But one of the things it wants to see is more jobs created. If it sees more jobs created, that means that there's more pressure on wages to rise. People aren't seeing wage rises at the moment. And so the reason why this is such a key number is simply because if you start to get more people employed, more pressure on wages to rise, that's where the inflationary pressures come from. And that could be the time when the Reserve Bank has to stop this very long run of very low interest rate policy. It's not yet. It's not for the foreseeable future. But that's the thing that economists and certainly the markets are keeping a weather eye out for.
Just briefly, Ross, so Facebook, of course, the big news today, banning news content in Australia. It's been a bit of a wild ride for media companies. There's the deals done that will help with Google, and now a very different result from Facebook, so far at least.
Well, it's true, and the deals done with Google are significant, particularly from News Corporation, the owner of this organisation. The reason why is because it's fought literally a rearguard action almost for a decade against these powerful new online giants, saying that the content that's created here and at other places should be paid for and therefore commercialised. So the deals that have been done, that are global deals, are very much important, along with, if you like, the individual deals done by other Australian media proprietors. Just one small anecdote on that, though, is that you would imagine after having done these deals with Google that maybe the share prices of local media companies would have gone up. In fact, they've mainly gone down today, I noticed. And so it just goes to show how fickle the financial markets are. When a deal that involves money is on the plate, maybe they were expecting more. But then Facebook, of course, is now the next target of many of these media proprietors, and indeed the government, which is holding its line. And it seems now as though it is a Mexican standoff, effectively, between the media proprietors here in Australia, Facebook, the ACCC and the government, to see who blinks first. And I would suggest right now that the government has significant resolve to try and really push this legislation through and to make certain that Facebook is brought really to the table. Facebook, of course, is free to withdraw, but it's going to be something that will be watched by other governments around the world.